we go again, everybody. Joining us today on the Format Podcast, you know who. It's number one beat writer for Notre Dame football for The Athletic, Pete Sampson. Pete, thanks for taking the time out to join us tonight.
Of course, I'm sorry we didn't connect in person over the weekend when you're out at Notre Dame, but always good to be with you, Bruce.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's kind of talk about Notre Dame this season. Obviously, there's been a lot of turnover there from the coaching ranks and everything. Haven't really had a chance to discuss that with you, but overall, that's been discussed ad nauseum. Marcus Freeman obviously taking over for Brian Kelly, and the program looked to have been in a pretty good place where Brian Kelly left it. 5 straight 10-win seasons. Marcus Freeman steps in, has some difficulty, loses his first 3 games as head coach, but it looked like Notre Dame was kind of getting into the groove and figuring out who they were. And then Stanford Saturday night, obviously 16-14 loss at home. I think Notre Dame was a 16.5-point favorite, 17 point favorite in that game. And, you know, obviously I was there, watched it from the stands and everything. And I'm wondering, what do you see is probably Notre Dame's biggest issue right now? Because I'm watching and what I'm seeing is lack of offensive identity, and other than try to get the ball to Michael Mayer in every way possible, which is great when you got a talent like that, but just a general lack of offensive identity, even when, in my estimation, Notre Dame starts to get it rolling with the run game. For whatever reason, inexplicably, they go away from it. Obviously, there's not a lot of depth in the wide receiver room, but even when you have Tobias Merriweather, and we'll talk about him coming in, making a huge play, and then not too much after that, what, in your estimation, has been, you know, the reason for such inconsistent play by the Irish this season?
I mean, it's kind of a little bit of all the above, right? Like, I think that, you know, on Saturday night, that I thought the offensive line actually played pretty well.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that the running backs played well. Mm-hmm. Michael Mayer did Michael Mayer stuff. Mm-hmm. I thought, but you know, Drew Pine really struggled. He had opportunities to make throws deep that he did not hit. You know, I sort of, you know, you go through, you watch the games and chart all sorts of different stuff. And, you know, I think for the most part against BYU, North Carolina, he was probably like a 33% passer on deep shot throws, which for me is like 20-yard passes. And I think on Saturday night, he was, scroll to it here, I think it was about like 1 of 5. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was 1 of 5 for, you know, the 1 touchdown to Tobias Merriweather. Mm-hmm. And like, it's not like you need to hit 60% of them, but you got to hit 2, not just 1. You know, whether that's to Lorenzo Styles or the other one to Tobias Merriweather. And then, you know, it was probably it reminded me a little bit of a late era Charlie Weiss game where Notre Dame really needed like 10 things to go wrong to lose, and all 10 they couldn't figure out how to make happen. You know, a lot of that is, you know, you get Chris Tyree lined up incorrectly on a Mayer touchdown. So it's like you have these really minor mistakes that wipe off major gains, or, you know, even just like the JD Bertrand apparent fumble and recovery that got overturned. Their margin for error is so small right now with how they play football, which is, you know, very run first, conservative defensively, that they're just not able to overcome it. So I don't think they have a great offensive identity, but I think they have one. But I think part of that identity is like they try to compress the game, shorten the game. Mm-hmm. And to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense against a team where you have more talent. More plays would benefit you because that's more opportunities for your talent to show itself as being better than the opposition. And that's just not how they played it on Saturday night. So it's a team that's got still a lot of things to get figured out.
So one of the interesting things you said was that you feel like Notre Dame offensively kind of has an identity, but maybe they're not able to really enforce it yet. So my question is this, coming into the season, I was under the impression, maybe like a lot of people were, that Brian Kelly was kind of handcuffing Tommy Rees, and that we would see a more aggressive, kind of more explosive passing offense going downfield. we haven't seen a whole lot of that, and I'm not sure if it has to do with the lack of depth in the wide receiver room, or just the way he's calling plays. There doesn't seem to necessarily be rhyme or reason to how he's calling plays. Now, when we talk about identity and how an OC calls plays, you have people who have a specific identity. For instance, on the NFL level, you look at the Tennessee Titans. They are going to run first and try to bludgeon you with Derrick Henry and do everything off of that. Or you look at Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Now, of course, Pat Mahomes is an elite generational talent, but in general, the offensive identity is, to be multiple and to do a lot of things in the passing game and be innovative there. But you don't look at Tommy Rees. The way he calls plays, to me, seems almost random. Now you can look at the way the Patriots used to do things and not really have an identity, but whatever the opposition didn't do well, they attacked that. And I get that, but I'm really not sure what Tommy Rees is doing. What have you been able to gather in your interactions with players and staff about what is his idea behind what he's trying to do here offensively?
I mean, he would like to sort of be a run first, play action, pass game OC. They run so many different personnel sets that it's kind of hard to figure out, okay, this week you're in 11 personnel. We got 3 receivers, a back, and a tight end. But then, the week prior, you're sort of almost split evenly between 11 personnel and 12 personnel when you got a couple tight ends. Or North Carolina when you ran a bunch of 21 personnel where you have 2 backs and a tight end. So I think that the personnel set are sort of week to week. That feels more random to get at here. And how does this personnel sort of help you get there? I don't really have a great answer on that. I think he's been very creative in how he's gotten Michael Mayer open, because it's obvious to everyone that that's where the ball wants to go. Mm-hmm. And yet he's still open a lot. So I give him credit for that, but I think that they haven't quite figured out, or they haven't played to what their best personnel group is. And what I mean that is, like, you've got 5 skill position lines to fill in. Mm-hmm. Michael Mayer is one of those lines. I would argue that 2, 3, and 4 are all running backs.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating that they play like a wishbone style of offense, but to me, it would make a lot more sense to have 2 running backs be more of a base and less of a changeup. And then 11 personnel is sort of it's something that you mix in regularly, but it isn't like your go-to personnel set, which it was on Saturday night, because I don't watch Notre Dame football play and think, man, I'm glad they got more reps for Braden Lindsey or Jaden Thomas or Lorenzo Styles, opposed to, man, I wish they got more reps for Audric Estime or Logan Diggs or Chris Tyree. Those are the players to me that I think need more work, not less, and the receivers probably need less, not more.
Okay. I got it. So with a guy like Michael Mayer, who, again, we know is clearly the best offensive player on the team, arguably the best player on the team, period, and your biggest weapon. And so the prevailing thought in football is generally on every level, get the ball in the hands of your best player as much as you can possibly do it. But is it getting to a point where it's almost too much with Michael Mayer in terms of it's making it so easy on defenses, especially on third downs? And we know he's done a lot of amazing things on I think he's got the third most third down receptions in the country for a tight end this year. So we know what kind of security blanket Michael Mayer can be. But we saw Stanford do a solid job of, I'm not going to say take him away, but control him and not letting him wreck the game. At what point, does Notre Dame realize, like, they have to do something else? Like, of course you want it in Mayer's hands, but you've also got to do something else to be able to even further open up Mayer and be a little less predictable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that stuck with me most from Saturday night is there's a play in the first quarter, Notre Dame's driving. They have this, like, sort of this play that goes to Mayer for a touchdown. It gets called back for the illegal motion or the illegal alignment that I mentioned earlier. But a couple plays later, they have Mayer and Braden Lindsey to the left of Drew Pine and 3 receivers to the right. Stanford drops 8. that should gum up the works because there's not going to be a lot open. But three guys go to Mayer, leaving Lindsey in a one-on-one situation. He comes wide open against the safety, and Drew Pine misses him by 10 yards. Like, there definitely are opportunities where the team does overcommit to Mayer and somebody else comes open. I don't think Notre Dame has done a very good job of finding that other person. Whether that is Pine being too reliant on Mayer, I'm not sure, or whether he's sort of told to be too reliant on Mayer, I'm not sure. But they need to hit that play to Lindsey, not just because it's a touchdown, they probably win the game if they do it.
Right.
But it sends a signal on tape that, like, we have other weapons. Right. And right now there's just not enough else out there. Like, one good game from Jaden Thomas against BYU is not enough for Clemson to be like, well, we really got to respect Jaden Thomas and not double up Michael Mayer. They just haven't had other guys step up to demand an opponent backs off Mayer. So it's going to be harder and harder to keep Mayer involved. I'm sort of surprised they've been able to keep him involved as much as they have to date.
Right. Okay, so with that, now let's talk a little bit Tobias Merriweather. What are you hearing about why he's gotten so little time on the field this season? Is it just is it culture-wise? I know that Brian Kelly was not big on true freshmen getting a lot of time. Is it a culture thing? Is he having problems digesting the playbook? What is the issue that we're not seeing more of him? Because we saw flashes of what he can be Saturday night.
Yeah, I think so. We actually talked to him on Tuesday night in interviews and asked him about that. And he's like, I don't have the handle on the little stuff, basically at the level that I need to play every snap to be a rotational player. And he's like, I'm getting there, but right now his role in the offense is basically you're tagged in plays that you feel like can go to them. I don't think they've gotten to enough of those. I don't think that Tobias Merriweather needs to be playing 40 snaps a game, but he should be 15, 20, 25, sort of be your fourth receiver.
Right.
And I asked him about, there's a play against Cal where he subs in and Drew Pine, you see him signal to Merriweather to come in motion, and Merriweather just stands there. He doesn't know what to do. And he's like, and that was my last play of the game. And I get it. I understand why that happened and why I didn't get to any more playing time after that. But he's a really self-aware guy. I was very impressed talking to him. I would be quite surprised if he didn't turn it on in the second half of the season as he gets more and more of the offense. Because his skill set is too unique not to play.
Right.
And I think he's too cognizant of what he needs to get done to play to essentially to not do it. I think that I've covered players who you ask them like, what do you need to do to get on the field more, and they can't give you an answer. Merriweather can give you an answer, and that's like a huge first step in getting him out there more. So yeah, I think he was a little surprised he wasn't further along when it started, but he talked about how he's gained 15 pounds since he enrolled in the summer. He had a lot of ground to cover from a strength point of view. And he played in an offense in high school that was basically throw ball, catch ball. There wasn't a lot of nuance to it. It's like the opposite of Benjamin Morrison at corner, the freshman who's now playing, I think he played 75 snaps against Stanford. He came from a defense that wasn't see ball, get ball. It was like read the offensive scheme, do your homework. He was just, his football IQ was much higher at that position than Merriweather's was a receiver. So that's where Merriweather needs to get caught up the most. But as soon as he does, I would be surprised if he did not turn into a very, very good player at Notre Dame.
Okay. And what do we see with Deion Colzie? That's another young guy who is very talented. I saw him listed on the upcoming this week UNLV on the depth chart where Merriweather wasn't. What do you see as the difference between those two? Is it the kind of similar things, the little things, and?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to be blunt, athletically, Merriweather is far superior to Colzie.
Okay.
I know their recruiting rankings might be similar, but when you watch them in practice, there's not they're all But Merriweather is springy and bouncy and quick and can elevate, and Colsey just looks more like a big body out there. So to me, if I was looking at like, okay, where's the pass game going to go in the second half of the season, I would be all in on Merriweather, and I probably would not devote a whole lot to Deion Colsey. Maybe he can help you as like in a like a run blocking situation, but you get back to like who are your best 5 skill position players to put out there. Merriweather's in that conversation. There are younger tight ends, Holden Stays, Eli Raridon, that I think should get more work in the second half of the season. But to me, Deion Colsey, it's like you see it every year. The guys that were highly ranked in recruiting that maybe just don't pan out, and I'm not sure that I've seen anything from Colsey to date that makes me think like, oh, this is a guy that needs to play more. Whereas Merriweather's the opposite. I've seen more than enough that makes me think he needs to play more.
Deion Colsey's from Georgia, am I right on that?
He is, yep.
So I think that probably has a lot to do with the recruiting rankings, him being from Georgia versus Merriweather being from Washington State. And Washington State puts out some guys, but you have this whole mentality that every player from the South is better than every player from everywhere else. So that may be playing a role in the recruiting rankings. So I get that. Back to Tommy Rees a little bit. Is there any concern for his job? I've heard, I know it's early, but I've heard some, fans and things like that, maybe calling for his job, maybe saying Freeman needs to set an example early on, saying this just isn't good enough, especially for what Notre Dame has been in recent memory. Where are we on that?
I don't think that Freeman would make a change in season, especially we're one game removed from BYU and North Carolina,
right?
Where the offense did play well. The last in-season coaching change that I remember at Notre Dame was Brian Van Gorder in 2016, and that was an epic disaster. That defense had completely fallen apart. There was nothing you could point to as even like a glimmer of hope. Whereas with this one, they were really bad against Stanford after 2 good games. And I think that, do you get a pass because you're playing a backup quarterback? Not really, because you've been the offensive coordinator long enough that you're in charge of who's in your quarterback room. But I do think that circumstance gives you a little bit of leeway, certainly to make it through the season. But the offense has to get a lot better. It has to get a lot sharper. There's just too many mistakes happening out there. Like, you can't false start on the first play of the game.
Right.
Throw a 4th down pass that's a comeback route that would have left you 2 yards short of the first down anyway. So there's to me, that stuff is really bad. Probably more so than just how many points you're scoring or what your rushing yards per carry is. Just you're seeing a lot of mistakes out there that well-coached teams don't make.
Does Pine have the authority to make audibles at the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, they do that a lot. Yeah, it's you go to the line with 2 plays, and then he decides which one to run based on the look that you're getting. Or you look to the sideline, and Reese will signal down from the booth or call down to the booth. The signalers will signal in what play needs to be run. So yeah, there is some flexibility there. I would even argue maybe there's too much there because it just adds another layer of uncertainty. There's another thing to be sort of lost in translation if you're the quarterback or the receiver. And that's not a good healthy place to be.
Right. Part of what I was thinking about as well in terms of if Tommy Rees's job is in jeopardy, whether it's during the season or, as you say, that's unlikely, but even if it's after the season, currently Notre Dame, I believe, is sitting at a number 3 ranking in terms of the recruiting class. And so now you've got a situation where could you be possibly endangering a lot of those great offensive recruits that they have coming in if you make a change at OC prior to next season? The new one you bring in may be running something different, and these players not only don't have a connection with the new OC in terms of relationships, they may not fit that scheme, et cetera, et cetera. What type of role do we think that plays in the decision Marcus Freeman has to make now as the head guy? Because we know it's not only X's and O's at that position.
It's got to factor into it. Why is Notre Dame's tight end always open? because their tight end is incredible.
That good.
And he was a 5-star recruit. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not complicated. Why is Blake Fisher, future pro? He was almost a 5-star recruit. Like there are going to be some Joe Alt stories where a 3-star makes good and really impresses everybody, but like that's not what wins in the playoffs.
No.
It's a 3-star, low 4-star quarterback like Drew Pine, or a 3-star quarterback like Ian Book is not winning in the college football playoff. That's where Trevor Lawrence is winning. That's where Justin Fields is winning. That's where Bryce Young is winning. So that's, to me, it all comes back to, and this kind of ties in a little bit with like, would you make a change early if you're Marcus Freeman at OC, if you feel like a change is necessary? Is it better for your program or not? And if it's not, then don't do it. I think that if you're Marcus Freeman, you absolutely have to make sure your relationships with your commitments are rock solid, especially CJ Carr, the quarterback, if you're going to make a change. Especially the quarterback. Like, I think that you can, if you lose a running back or a receiver or tight end, that's fine. You can find another one. But as we've all seen watching Notre Dame, it's hard to find elite quarterback play. And when you have one committed, as Tommy Rees got CJ Carr to commit, and he's built that relationship really well, you got to make sure you hang on to that one big time.
Okay, so let's switch over to the defense before I get you out of here. One of the things I was looking forward to coming into the season was seeing Isaiah Foskey hopefully be a game wrecker. Now, we know athletically he's a freak, but we haven't seen him be that game wrecker, that type that really takes over week in, week out, that Aiden Hutchinson, that Joey or Nick Bosa type. So how much of it is he's just not that guy? How much of it is a lot of plays are being designed away from him? He's being doubled a lot, obviously being a defensive lineman. How would you balance that out in terms of what he's doing, what he's not doing, versus what the opposition is doing to try to slow down his production?
So when the season started, I remember being in Columbus and talking to somebody on Ohio State staff before the game and saying like, man, we're really worried about number 7. A lot of attention is going to go to him. And I checked in after the game and they're like, we could single block him, no problem. So I think it has much more to do with Foskey's play than how opponents are dealing with him or blocking with him. He just has not, he just hasn't kicked it up a notch. The defensive line is really hard to evaluate right now because it's like, I feel like they're a pretty good group, but they're not good in the way that I thought they were going to be. Like I thought Foskey was going to be a game wrecker. I thought Jason Ademilola would be very good. And I think that he's had a nice season, but I didn't think Justin Ademilola or Nano Osafo-Mensah would be guys that I'd be focused on after games. And they played pretty well. I didn't expect Jacob Lacey to leave in the middle of the season. So it's a weird position, but I think the Foskey situation, he's not kicked on from where he was last year. If anything, I think he's sort of like taken a step back. So that's a tough position to be in because I think that Notre Dame's success was relying on a lot of things, but one of them was that you were double teaming Foskey, and that sort of changed how offenses were going to have to play you. And he hasn't been good enough to sort of demand that kind of respect or attention from opposing offense coordinators.
Do you think he's good enough to be that?
Yeah, because I mean we've seen it, right? I mean you've seen it his junior year, like turn it on and be a dominant force. I don't really have a great sense of like why that hasn't happened. He still looks good. It's not like he has a weird injury that nobody knows about. Just has not clicked for one reason or another. I think it's, at this point, what it's on the coaches to figure out. All right, how do we turn this guy loose? How do we play some line games that maybe free him up? I mean, there was a play against BYU where they got him matched up with a running back in pass protection, which looked great. How do you create some more of those opportunities where he's in a position where he has a physical advantage over who he's going against, not just because he's big and strong and tall, but because the scheme sets him up to have success too. That's kind of on the coaches to get figured out.
Got it. So we look at now Al Golden, defensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. First question, how much of a variance schematically is there between what he does and what Marcus Freeman was doing last year?
I think they do less, actually, because I remember at the beginning of the year last year, they were playing a lot of like 3-man fronts where like a defensive end would drop in almost like a middle linebacker position. Like they don't do that anymore. I don't think Freeman blitzed the safeties as much. Not that Al Golden does it a lot, but man, when it's happened, it has not gone well.
I was that was my next question.
So scrap that.
Yes.
I think that they definitely play much more nickel as base than Freeman did.
Okay.
Tariq Bracy essentially has replaced Jack Kaiser in the starting lineup when both players are healthy. So that's a difference. That Freeman was much more likely to stay in base personnel or do like a 3-3-5, whereas Golden is much more of a 4-2-5, more of a classic nickel defense. So that's a little bit different. Are they pressuring more or less? I feel like it's probably a little bit less.
I think it's less also.
I don't think that they're as creative in what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's much more just base defense.
Right.
And it's been fine, but I don't think there's like, you're not seeing flashes of like, ooh, this could be a dominant group. I think some of that is like, somebody like Maris Leafau, they just expected was going to play better. And they haven't been able to bring out the best of him that they saw in August last year before he had the ankle injury and was lost for the year. So it's, I feel like Al Golden's defense, it's been okay.
Right.
I feel like their sort of base statistics are fine, but when you get into like dead last nationally in turnovers, I think third from bottom in red zone touchdown percentage, not getting hands on balls at all. Like they don't do the stuff that changes the flow of games.
Right.
But in terms of like just holding their own and getting you to a point where, hey, we're going to give up 17, 20 points. As long as we can score 24, we're fine. I mean, the problem has been Notre Dame's offense has not been able to deliver that.
Right. I think it's pretty frustrating when you're less aggressive. But I understand the premise of Al Golden's defense, but I think that only works when you can get legitimate and constant pressure from your front four. And when you're not
which I
getting
think that he thought they were like, I think that's one of those things where like the staff thought they were going to be better at that, and they've proven to be. So it's like you build your defense around this concept, and then the concept proves faulty, and then you're like, well, okay, well, we got to do something else, or you keep at it and see if you can sort of unlock this potential that you thought you had there the whole time. And I just don't. I think they might be kind of coming to terms with the fact that like maybe they're just not going to be a great pressure with 4 defense. Because they've been fine. Like it's not like the 2014 or 2016 where they didn't get their first sack of the season until like game 6. It's not like that. But I thought that this defense was going to be sort of like maybe 2019, where you had Khalid Kareem, Julian Okwara, Dalen Hayes, Jameer Jones, Adeola Deje, Heinisch, Myron Tagovailoa, just like old, good, like some pros, but not like 5 elite guys.
Right.
And they would just be able to take over games sometimes, and it just hasn't happened.
Right. I think so. So now to that point, you're not getting it up front. You have to try and manufacture pressure from somewhere. But, and this is what you mentioned it earlier, when he sends those safety blitzes, we get burned. I mean, it's been happening since Ohio State. Maybe you say with Ohio State, okay, that's the best receiving core in the country, it's going to happen. But then you see it consistently happening. Why are you still sending those? And you also got to wonder, Al Golden's a guy, he's been a head coach, he's been an NFL guy. Where are the adjustments? That's what I don't understand. And I think a lot of people who are following Notre Dame football from the media standpoint, as well as fans, aren't understanding. Where are the adjustments from a guy who's been around the block and has been to the highest level?
Yeah, because he's talked about like it's not a halftime adjustment, it's an in-game adjustment. Like you don't have time to wait to halftime. And it's one of the, Freeman was only here for a year as DC, but like Clark Lee was incredible in the
Yes.
second half. Like,
Yes, he was.
he would go into halftime, he would know what you were doing, and he'd
Mm-hmm.
know how to stop it, and he would know what you would try to do to adjust to that, and he'd know how to stop that too. That may just be similar to the Merriweather-Colsey situation, where like Clark Lee was just better at that. And I think Al Golden is good, but he's not Clark Lee. He's not Mike Elko. And so, it's like Clark Lee and Mike Elko, I think, had better defensive lines to work with. Where you had Tillery, Okwara, Kareem, Hayes, etc. Even I think Tranquil and Coney would be superior to what the linebackers they have out there now are. Safeties, Gilman, Elliott, Hamilton. I think you would take all three of those guys over any of the safeties they're putting out there now. So it's I don't want to paint the picture as like Notre Dame is like talent poor on defense, but I think that they probably were better coached and more talented in 18, 19, 20 than they are right now with the guys that are thrown out there.
Does Marcus Freeman kind of stick his fingers in the defensive pot at all? Or is he really focusing on
I think he definitely was like,
job?
all right, let's safety blitz. Let's take that out.
Right.
But other than that, that's hard to say. We ask him about that with Reese all the time. And I think his feedback is much more like, I want to run the ball here. I want to throw the ball here. With Golden, he can speak his language a lot more.
Okay.
I wonder if he feels like the need to actually do it though. Because it's like, I wouldn't look at, well, like I said, the defense hasn't been great, but the defense has been good enough for Notre Dame to be 6-0.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're 3-3. So that's probably not where I'd be putting most of my attention if I was Marcus Freeman.
All right. Well, Pete, thanks so much for your time. I think I'm going to leave it there. I could go all night with this, you know that, but I'm going to definitely leave it there. I really appreciate you coming on to share this stuff with us. What do you want to leave us on? Is there anything kind of closing thought you have? What do you see for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think it's, and I think if they had just escaped Stanford, even if they had muddled their way to a win there, what I really wanted to see from Notre Dame is to get to Clemson at 6-2.
Yeah.
And now getting there at 4-4 feels suddenly more likely with Syracuse being ranked
and undefeated.
Not saying that undefeated. I'm not saying that would be like this monumental win if Notre Dame went out there and won, but it's not a game that you just check off on the schedule either. So I think there's still a chance for Notre Dame to sort of improve as the season goes on, even if they're going to finish 7-5. But at a minimum, they need to go out to USC and play a game that is as competitive as the Ohio State game was through three quarters. You've got to show that by the end of the year, because right now I feel like you don't want to look back at this year and feel like, was the best performance the first three quarters at Ohio State and it never got any better than that. I thought that there were two things this season I thought were most important to show. One, Marcus Freeman is a bona fide head coach. We'll see. I think the jury's out on that. And then two, Tyler Buchner is a bona fide starting quarterback. We're never going to know because of his injury. So it's a tough season to evaluate. But the teams getting better in November would be significant to me. And then, frankly, probably the most significant thing at this point is just the recruiting class holding together, because that's what's going to get you over the hump ultimately at the end.
All right, and there you have it. Again, that's Pete Sampras, Notre Dame beat writer for The Athletic. Great publication. If you don't already have it, go ahead, get that. I love The Athletic. Some really good content, really fantastic long-form stuff. So thanks so much for what you do, Pete. Thanks so much for stopping in and visiting and sharing your Notre Dame insider information with us.
Definitely. No problem, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
All right. You have a good night.
Cool. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.